Welcome to FacilitiesU. This session is for facilities leaders managing multi-site restaurant portfolios where uptime, food safety, and brand standards matter. Today's guest is Irvin, a facilities leader with a vendor-side background who manages multi-state restaurant portfolios with an operations-first mindset. A former service company owner, Irvin brings practical insight into vendor performance, accountability, and cost control, and now supports critical system, PM, and capital projects to protect uptime and the guest experience. Welcome, Irvin. Happy to have you.
Happy to be here. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks. Taking a look at your LinkedIn profile, I noticed that your journey here was a little bit different. You were a business owner for, it appears, almost a decade, and you kind of came up on the vendor side originally, and now you're on the FM side, right? Two different sides of the coin. So, just to kind of start off with that, what are some things that most facilities managers don't understand about the vendor side and how you were supporting various entities?
I would say a lot of times the operators on the facility side, they don't understand things like the missed ETAs or the delays and things like that that the vendors miss. They take it as the vendor's not caring, that they didn't try hard enough. And coming from that side, I know that that's not always the case. There's a lot of things that go into it. Maybe there was parts that didn't show up. Maybe there were techs that called off. Maybe you had a tech that was scheduled to come out and look at a piece of equipment that was not something that was as critical. Maybe it was a toaster. Maybe it was something that you have a redundant piece of equipment on, and a walk-in went down. So I have to take that into account and send somebody out to somebody's piece or to a walk-in. So I've missed your ETA, but I'm trying to put somebody else's piece of equipment back up. So I've got now dispatch bottlenecks because of call-offs or other equipment down. Maybe I just gotten bad information from technicians. They didn't order the right parts. They didn't communicate something back from a manager of times the restaurants were going to be busy, or times that they were expecting the technician to be there, or something else. So there's a lot of communication things that go into it, and all these things stack up, and there's a lot of moving parts, and so there's a lot of things that happen, and it's not just the vendor didn't care. And the biggest thing is communicating and staying ahead of it, and the vendor catching those early and going, hey, we see this happening. We know it's happening. We've got a solution for it happening, and we're taking care of you. So.
Yeah. And I imagine too, like from the vendor side, overseeing multiple locations at once, it was like, you're working with people where, things are so critical, and obviously everyone thinks that their specific emergency is the most critical. So balancing that can be a little difficult, right? So if you flip that over and you flip to now where you are, and you're an FM, and you're now dealing with, vendors as they're communicating with you, and they're trying to prioritize you, and maybe having miscommunications with their technicians or part delays. So now being on this side, has it given you a different perspective on, what kind of where you formerly sat?
Oh, I'm the most important now.
No. Oh yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you
more. Yes, it actually, there was a huge learning curve. I had to get that owner mentality out of my head first. That was the biggest thing that I had to do first. And then I think also realizing the restaurants, getting the vendors to understand the restaurants and the operator side, they don't have an opportunity to give a first impression again to the customer.
Yeah, you only get one chance, right?
Yeah, they've got this chance, and the customer sees it's 110 degrees out and it's 90 degrees in my restaurant.
Yeah.
They have this chance to their steaks are 86 because my walk-in is down, or my broiler is down, or they have this chance to ruin their meal because I can't cook it, or my walk-in is down and I just lost $5,000 worth of food, or my plumbing is backed up and I just had customers walk in and I see stuff backing out of the bathroom because my plumbing backed up. That is something that sticks with somebody.
Yep.
So this is my only shot at impressing the customer. So they don't have tomorrow to show the customer this stuff again. And getting that through to the vendor isn't always the easiest thing.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few things I wanted to highlight. And first off was like the vendor accountability and kind of how that breaks down in terms of either poor communication, missed ETAs, things like that. And then on the flip side, I almost think about as this kind of transitions to my next question for you. You mentioned first impressions with the customer, and I sometimes think about how certain vendors that I've onboarded in the past, their first impressions are amazing, right? They start off, they're super communicative, they're showing up on time, they're kind of packaging stuff for you. Well, I can save you this if we do this together. And then maybe over time, those acceptable excuses start adding up a little bit, right? And things like that. So what are some systems that you put in place now that helps those quote unquote acceptable excuses from becoming normal operating behavior?
Basically setting up accountability. You don't let gray areas happen. Setting and defining clear expectations from the beginning. What is acceptable, what isn't acceptable. And then you can also, like what I do is I have quarterly reviews. Not just a quarterly review of, hey, this is where you guys are messing up, or this is what you guys are doing right. What am I doing right? What can I do better? What can we, as a company, do better to help you guys? Where can we go better? What can I do with my restaurants to help you guys succeed better? Whether it's in service channel, which is what we use to help with our metrics and our communication with the vendors and stuff like that. We use it for the cost analysis of our service tickets. We use it for the measuring the speed of calls. We use it for whether we're using it for the cost of the repairs or replacing the equipment. So there's a lot of different things that we can do. We do on that. We review, like I said, I've set up to where I do quarterly reviews with my vendors, and I also meet. We do a annual walkthrough with the restaurants, and I try to meet with the vendors physically on site as well, so that I can walk the restaurant with them and have them point out to me different things that are going on at the restaurant and different things like that.
It sounds like a lot of your success has come from your proactive nature, right? It sounds like you're proactive about obtaining feedback. You're proactive about giving feedback, about understanding, building that relationship correctly from the ground up, right? Do you approach the maintenance schedule, preventative maintenance, in the same way? Are you just as proactive on that side? And then, if so, why do you think that quite often facilities managers don't take PM seriously, or why do you think those programs may quietly fail?
I think that a lot of times PM programs can be thought of as just money losses, and they're box checkers. The PMs can be if they're done wrong and they're used as, hey, we completed the PMs, we checked the boxes, and we submitted the paperwork. They just didn't. They're not being used right. So yeah, you're not getting your money's worth.
Yep.
You may still have equipment breakdown. You're not getting ahead of things. So you're not really understanding what the PM is for. You're not doing a PM just to change filters.
Yep.
You're doing a PM to change the filter.
It's asset protection, right?
Do what?
It's asset protection, right?
Exactly. When you change that filter, are you seeing an increase in your airflow? If you're not seeing an increase in your airflow, why not? Is there a reason that you're not seeing an increase in your airflow across your coil? We had an issue at one point where we weren't seeing increases over your coils. Okay, are we doing the right types of PMs? Do we need to? It's not that we need to increase or do more PMs, but do we need to add more criteria to our PMs? Do we need to add more readings to our PMs? Do we need, because we might have still failed certain things with PMs, but do we need to add certain more criteria to it to make sure that we're not failing, our equipment's still failing after a PM? So, you got to make sure that you're doing your PMs to meet certain reasons for doing the PMs, not just to check a box. You're wanting to make sure that you're, catching things before they happen. Your motors are going bad. Your amp draws are increasing. Your airflow is starting to slow down. Your compressors are starting to get sluggish. Different things like that will start to show as they go down, and you want to start to catch that so it doesn't happen on Saturday night or a Sunday night, and all of a sudden you got 110 degrees in your dining room and you start losing customers.
Yeah. You've mentioned how, the vendors, the PMs, everything affects, at Cooper's Hawk, you have to be cognizant of the food quality, the wine integrity, right? You mentioned the walk-ins need to be a certain temperature. You mentioned dining atmosphere, right? That first chance you get, make an impression with the customer, and especially now where, each and every customer can be a voice, can go leave a review, can go, you have to think about your brand consistency. So for someone in your role or an aspiring person that wants to be in this role, what are some of the biggest guest-facing consequences, some of the biggest decisions you have to make on a daily basis in order to make sure that the customer experience at your locations are top-notch? And I know you mentioned the obviously the plumbing, which is really basic, and the food quality,
right.
It's like HVAC, those things. What would you say?
I would say probably the biggest things are the things that the customers never see.
Interesting.
I would say the back of the house, your HVAC, your walk-ins. If your walk-in is down, your refrigeration is down, it affects your food. It affects your food quality. It affects your if your HVAC is down or your HVAC air balance is down. It affects your the way that the smoke is leaving the building. It affects your breathing. It affects your it's stuff that the customer never sees, but it affects them. It affects the temperatures in the building. It affects the way that they go to open a door, and it either flies out of their hand or they have to struggle to open it. And it's just the little things. So it's just little things, but they never see it. But it sticks in the back of their minds. And I think those things affect them. And it's a way of, or it's something that you can control before it ever gets to them.
You're so right, where it's like all the little pieces that add up to the final, it's like each little variable in that little, algebra equation that eventually leads to the final solution, right? The door closers, all the little things that do that, and you work, obviously with operations, with design, construction, executive teams, you're working with a plethora of different areas. Any tips or anything, how you translate technical risks, capital needs, maintenance discipline, how you kind of communicate that to people that may not be as deeply into the facilities world? How do you, how do you work alongside and really able to communicate what your direct needs are?
I would say basically just you try to bridge the gap. We speak one language. A lot of times, we speak a little bit more technical than the executive levels speak. I know technicians and the vendor side speak a little bit more technical sometimes than the facility managers, which I have the luxury of knowing how the vendor side speaks sometimes. But the executives, they tend to speak a little bit more on the papers and the numbers, and they tend to speak more on the risk and the cost and the brand impact and stuff like that. So without getting into that, you kind of have to bridge the gap of, okay, look, if we know it's going to cost this, but if we don't spend this now, this might be what it's going to cost us financially, operationally, and reputationally in the future. So it's bridging that gap of maybe we're not talking about what it's going to, cost us with, speaking to them on paper and speaking the executive talk, but, kind of bridging that gap in the language and talking with them that way.
Yeah. And I found quite often when I was trying to relate to maybe our financial department, that repair versus replace, which is something that every FM runs into all the time. And I always just felt like, hearing how like detail oriented you are, and again, proactive, it helps when you can approach them and say, this is what we've spent. This is, how many times this specific vendor has been out, right? Let's say you mentioned your walk-in fridge. It's like, we've spent this and we've done this, we might have to pay an upfront cost now, but think about how much it's going to save us over the next 3 to 5 years, right? So I always found that it was that kind of communication that helped, right? Because you're right, we get a little technical, we get a little in the weeds, and sometimes we just need to be able to pull back and say, hey, this is what it's costing us, right? And this is also what it could cost us in things like, operations and brand integrity, right?
Yes.
Yep. So moving on. So, we talked about setting vendor expectations, We talked a little bit about designing accountability systems and how you work with your vendors and you ensure that there's accountability on both sides. How do you balance speed, quality, and cost, right? It's like, how do you balance, I need someone here right now versus I need someone that's going to work with me a little bit on the financial side versus like quality, right? Like, how do you make those assessments? Is it just, is trust the number one thing for you when it comes to like picking vendors, picking partners, picking staff members?
There is a lot of trust that goes into it. And I think there's a lot of, a lot of talking in the very beginning, a lot of communication, and a lot of, hey, show me I need a lot of notes. I need a lot of pictures. I need to see what's going on. There's especially with big ticket items. I'm one that when we replace a compressor or we do a big ticket item, I like to know some of the troubleshooting that went into it. Why are we replacing a compressor?
Yep.
If you had to put your leads onto a refrigerant to test the pressures, why? What led you to have to test my pressures? What led you to check at this? What led you to check that? And it's not that I'm questioning you as a technician. I just want to know your troubleshooting ways of how you got to that. And just kind of lead me down your path. That's all. I did it for, I owned the business for 12 years and I was a technician for part of that as owning a business, and I was a technician for years before that. So, I can troubleshoot a lot of these things over the phone and everything. So, I have the luxury of knowing a lot of what's going wrong before you even walk in the building. I just want to know what led you to it. And then there's a lot of times I'll get a quote and I know parts that I'll replace extra, because what I don't want to do is replace a compressor and have to turn right around in a week and replace 2 more parts that should have been replaced when that compressor got replaced.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's replace everything while you have that system open. Might as well do it. So,
yeah. As we start to wrap up here and thank you for being so open about some of your previous experiences and providing this information for, we get a lot of feedback from this podcast. It's not only people in your position, but it's people aspiring to be in your position. So for future facilities managers, I do want to go back to the vendor accountability question real quick, because that they really are the bread and butter, right? They are, they've got to show up. They've got to make the repairs. They're the ones that really make us look good when they're really working well. So, what are some habits that like quietly undermine vendor accountability? What's someone in your position? What are little habits they can form to really, like you mentioned the proactivity. What are some other things that they can just do to find success in the ways you have?
A habit that quietly undermines accountability is letting one exception slide without documenting it, and that's how your standards start eroding. So always document if you have an exception, document it, basically.
Yep. Well, what are some early signals that the vendor performance is drifting, that maybe it's time to find a replacement or time to have a hard conversation?
A lot of repeat calls.
Okay.
Vague documentation, and increased monitor only calls.
Wow. Yeah, that is very important. And then what facilities decisions have like the biggest, the most long-term impact, whether it's uptime, whether it's brand protection, or cost control?
I would say investing early in asset protection instead of reacting to failures.
Got it. This was super helpful. I do want to thank you for taking the time out to chat with us here today and sharing your knowledge. Here on the FacilitiesU podcast, these are the exact problems we're looking to study deeply, right? How facility systems behave when brand standards, vendors, and real world operations collide, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for everyone watching, if this is something you're navigating, you're not alone. Thank you, Aaron, for your valuable time. Very much appreciated.
Absolutely. Not a problem at all.
Take care.